This is a story about Jimmy B and Julie too. Two good buddies with nothing better to do. Sit around the bar, get drunk and talk some shop. When they get started, it's really hard for them to stop. Julie B with likes of beer on ice. Jimmy B thinks a Bloody Mary would be nice. Once they decided to call on a couple friends. Thought this chat should be something doesn't end. Singing, come on, drink storm with me. Come on, drink storm with me.
Welcome to Drinkstorming with Jim and Julie. The purpose of these chats with our Synergy partners and our members is to learn some interesting things about their businesses and about them as people. So these are completely unscripted conversations. We're just doing a little drink storming here. So we'll see where the conversation takes us. Cheers.
Cheers, Mark.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us. You know, since our business kind of starts and ends with people, we thought how fitting to start out our partnership podcast with our good friend Mark Connelly and talk about Culture Index and the value that our members can gain from this tool and our partnership. So, but before we get into that, Mark, we wanted to have just get to know you a little bit, right? You as a person. So tell us a little about yourself, you know, maybe family, hobbies, where you grew up, et cetera. Some fun stuff about Mark Connelly.
All right. So, so I grew up in New Jersey and kind of moved around a lot. It's been my first 15 years with General Mills. Went to school at University of Maryland and got a business degree. And then it was back in the day where every year they'd move you. And so I moved probably 7 times in the first 7 years and was with General Mills for 15 years and really been in leadership roles for 30 some years. And I started with Culture Index about 8 years ago, been doing that for the last 8 years and thoroughly enjoying it. Have a wife of, gosh, we got married early, Jim. It's like 37 years we've been married, right? So it's a long time. You stop counting at about 35, you know, it's just a lot. It's a lot. But, we've been married for about 37 years. Wonderful, great marriage. Got a couple kids, got a couple grandkids, and life is great. In Florida with the family right now, actually.
Oh, that's great. Well, I can relate. 37 years for Terry and I as well.
Really?
But can you top this? We dated for 7 years prior to that. She brings that up all the time.
Yeah, no, I can't top that. I'm not sure that's a good thing though, Jim.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Not many people can top that at all. Well, Mark, we're in some obviously really interesting times in the world. So many strange things and new things are happening. What are you seeing on the recruiting side that's different and new and challenging today?
Yeah, Julie, it's such a great question. I think that's the big thing. When I'm I work with about 175 different clients, and any one of them that I'm on the phone with, no matter what industry, it's recruiting is always the first thing that's brought up, right? And you know, everybody would say with a kind of resounding voice that things have changed a lot in the last couple of years. It's the job market has got just a lot tighter. And you know, what I've noticed is recruiting is just even the way people do recruiting. If you're going to win the war for talent, it's changed a lot. So I always tell people, hey, the first thing is if you're doing recruiting the same way that you were doing it a year or two ago, you're behind the curve, right? Because people are innovating in this tight market. There's some companies that are going, hey, listen, it's tough out there, and that frankly, they'll use it as an excuse, right? And go, hey, it's tough out there, right? But then others will say, hey, yeah, it's tough out there, and therefore they innovate new ways to recruit. And so it's forced innovation. And as a result of that, I think you see people who are winning the war for talent doing it in ways that at least I haven't seen in the past. Like when I ask clients about, hey, where'd you find that person, or how are you getting them? It's places like TikTok, right? Like, really, you're recruiting on TikTok? And like, yeah, it's a highly effective way, right? Or Slack, or their internal referral programs are radically different than they were a year ago. And so, you know, I think the key that I think companies really need to think about in light of this tight market in recruiting is they have to, have an awareness that it is hard, but then they go, and as a result, we're going to innovate, right? And so we start with who are we asking to do this? You know, I had oftentimes I'll do refreshers with clients, and they're 10 or 15, 20 clients in the Zoom meeting at the same time, and I always ask them, hey, tell me what you're doing that's working with recruiting. And through those meetings, some fascinating stuff comes up. But in this last one of the guys said, hey, we decided to have the same focus on talent acquisition as we have on customer acquisition. And so, like, they take customer acquisition really seriously, right? And they're always on the cutting edge to get new customers. But then when they got to talent acquisition, it was almost like it was an afterthought. And so they really had to take a look at, well, who do we have over that, and why are we not putting as much focus on talent acquisition as we do customer? And so that shift has really got them to think differently about who they're asking to do that in their company, and what what the approach is going to be to move from less reactive recruiting and much more proactive recruiting. I could go into a lot of what people are doing there, but I think that's the beginning, is just making that shift.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Mark, because we hear time and time again right now is that business has been good in our industry, but they're saying we can't find enough people to actually support our clients. We're struggling with that, and in some cases, maybe even turning away business. So your point of putting as much focus on acquiring talent is huge. I'm curious. We just had a people forum several weeks ago, and we talked about this, and not many people in our industry have dedicated HR person in their organization or teams of people. So I love what you're talking about, TikTok, Slack. I mean, I'm a baby boomer, so those are like, that was a whole different language to me, but I think it speaks to maybe getting the younger generation in our companies involved in that. So are you seeing companies that are actually dedicating teams? How are they making these changes happen to change their focus?
Yeah, Jim, I think, it's a really good question that, sometimes when you're running a business and, you're not really necessarily pausing to think about how much is it costing you to not be able to handle some of that call volume, right? And so the first thing I always ask people before we start talking about the solution is, let's quantify the cost of not having this being done well, right? Can you handle your call volume? If not, how much of your business are you turning away? What is your margin on that business? Let's put some dollar volume to what that cost is. And by the way, if you don't get that client, now you're not getting the referrals from that client as well. So let's put a real number to that. And usually when people put a number to that, it's quite a bit higher than they expected, right? And now it kind of puts the solution into more of a perspective, right? And then we say, listen, we've got to make sure that whoever we have leading this thing has to be somebody that we would be as confident putting them as our VP of business development, right? Because this is what this is. It's outside hunting, right? And so if you wouldn't be confident putting that person in business development, then you probably don't want to put them in recruiting, right? And so sometimes the solution, Jim, isn't that you have to kind of drive that person that you currently have over HR harder to be a recruiter. Sometimes the answer is, hey, can we carve out some time out of these some of our stronger salespeople and say, let's equip them to spend 3 or 4 hours a week on the recruiting end, and then they're going to need some coaching on how to do that. The other thing is bringing on somebody onto that HR team that really specializes in recruiting. And what I've often found in HR is they've got a person over there that their specialty really is compliance, benefits, payroll, those kinds of things. But very rarely is it that person's specialty to be recruiting. And that's part of the struggle, right? So we have to make sure we solve that problem first and get the right person as point over that. That person might already be in their company.
Interesting. Very interesting.
That's such a mind shift, I think. For companies to look at it that way, because in the past, I think we've looked at it as purely an HR task and focused on the checking things off. This is what we need to do. This is what you need to do. But really, it seems like we're getting to the point where it's a sales role. Like we should be selling our companies and explaining to people why they want to join us and what's great about our organizations. And it seems like there's a lot of conversation about understanding, especially with the younger generations, what are they really looking for when they are looking for a position and how we sell that.
That's absolutely right, Julie. It's really, recruiting is more of a sales and marketing function than an HR function. And a lot of companies that are doing recruiting well have taken it out of the HR department and put it in sales and marketing. But it's interesting if you do just a little bit of study and take a look at any of the clients that are that are inside of Synergy, right? And any of their open positions or any company, right? And what I typically do is go, hey, do you mind if I just go on Indeed or whatever job posting site you're on, and I'm just going to take a look at your ad and I'm going to act like I'm a candidate, right? And I'll type in the position in the area, and I'll realize, oh, they're not on page 1. Or page 2 or page 3, right? They're somewhere on page 4 or 5, and nobody gets to pages 4 and 5. And then when you get to their ad, oftentimes, Julie, to your point, they're not selling the company at all. Because if you look at it through the lens of a candidate, they're trying to answer 2 questions. Number 1 is this a great company that I would want to work for? Right? And number 2 is, what's in it for me? And I find that most companies, even in their marketing, which I would put in the reactive bucket, right? It's not yet proactively hunting. Even in the reactive bucket, usually do quite a poor job of answering those 2 questions. And so you've got to get somebody that thinks like a marketer, like a salesperson, to really lead that charge.
So Mark, that's interesting. I know you helped me a couple of years back write an ad, and you really kind of chopped up what I did and made it something. I'm like, wow, I want to go apply for this job myself. It was a really cool approach. When you speak to that ad, I think a lot of us were focused more on the role or the position. It sounds like you're talking about, you really should be talking about your culture and your team and why I would want to work there. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Yeah, most people are basically putting job descriptions online, and no potential candidate gets on a job posting site hoping to see a job description, right? I mean, the reason they're on there is because they hate their boss. And so they get on there, right? And they're going, hey, would this place have a better boss than my boss?
Watch it, guys.
Right? And so they're looking for, hey, is this a place that I'd want to work, right? And depending on the type of person you're looking for, they might be looking for security, or they might be looking for a place where they're going to be treated like an entrepreneur. And so that's part of making sure that you understand, that you don't sell every position the same. Based on the kind of person you're trying to draw, you're selling different things. But we do really want to make sure that we're selling the company and really selling the benefits. Oftentimes, when I take a look at a company's benefits, I'll go, hey, listen, I'll pop up my screen on Zoom and go, let's just take a look at how you compare against your competitors. And their packages are way better. And then I'll ask them, so, hey, what should we change to get more competitive? And their answer is, oh, we actually already have that stuff. They just didn't put it in the ad, right? They're not selling what they are actually offering. And so and the compliance officer inside of HR just doesn't naturally think that way. And it's unfair to ask them to think that way. That's why we want somebody that really has a sales and marketing focus to craft messaging that can attract people.
Mark, tell us about the Culture Index tool and how it can help us do that. It sounds like we could use that to find some people to help recruiting inside our own companies.
Sure. Yeah. So what the Culture Index assessment does is it helps you really identify what kind of person is most likely to succeed in a particular role. So for instance, I know Jim's profile, right? Like I would, if I was in a competing company, I would not want to have to compete against Jim in a sales and business development role, because he wakes up every day, knife in the teeth, 5th gear, and he's extremely persuasive. But he's not, there's not just one Jim out there, right? There's a lot of people wired like Jim. And so we can help you identify for that particular role, what's the hard wiring of that individual that is most likely to succeed in that kind of role. Now, we don't measure everything, right? We can't measure intelligent or stupid or drunk or sober or crazy or not, like you guys still have to vet that stuff out. But what we do measure, we measure very accurately. And then we help you with recruiting strategies to really make sure that we're filling the pipeline and thinking about our messaging and how are we getting that messaging out? How are we hunting for these people? And then once those candidates come in, our software, they take our survey. And what I like about ours is it takes less than 10 minutes. And so you're not asking an incoming candidate to take a 45-minute thing, right? And then as soon as they complete it in real time, our software stack ranks their natural hard wiring against the profile that you said you're looking for. And it ranks all the candidates from 100% match down to 0% match. And we measure that hard wiring with a 90% validity and test retest reliability. So we give you really clean data. And so what we can do is we really help you focus your interview energy on the people that are naturally hardwired to succeed in the role that you're going to put them in. And in other words, it's Moneyball for business. We're stacking the deck in your favor with every people decision you make.
So Mark, I'm sure a lot of the people who will be watching this and listening to this are familiar with DISC profile, Myers-Briggs. By the way, you're very kind saying I'm a persuader. I've always taken those things. They say I talk a lot, but so thank you for that. So how is Culture Index maybe different from those tools and maybe the way that you utilize the tool you just mentioned for those who may not be familiar with the tool?
Yeah, so Jim, I think any of those assessments provide value, right? And so, but anytime I'd look at an assessment, there'd be really two things I would focus on. Number one is the actual validity of the score, the results, right? And I don't want to disparage any other organization. I would just encourage people to do the research for their own. We give you the research results for Culture Index if you're a client. And at 90%, we don't know anybody else in this industry that can match that level of validity and test retest reliability. When I started back with General Mills back in like 1902, like I had to take all those other assessments that you mentioned, and they're good, but they don't have the same validity. So that's the first thing, just the sheer validity of the data. But then the second thing I think, Jim, you mentioned is how do we actually apply this stuff? Because the data is only as good as the organization that's helping you think through the application of that data. And so I happen to specialize in this industry. I've got a whole bunch of clients that are in HVAC, plumbing, electric, those kinds of things. And so we really talk about how do you actually use this to move the needle in the business, not only as a hiring filter, but the people you already have on your team as well.
Doing this for 8 years, Mark, and you work with a lot of different Synergy members and obviously many other companies out there. How many profiles do you think you've seen in your career?
Oh, I don't know, hundreds of thousands?
Hundreds of thousands. Wow.
Yeah, Julie, it's kind of like I feel like I watch the same movie every day, right?
It's Groundhog Day.
Yeah, you know, because you see the same patterns over and over and over and over again. And, you know, I forget who said it. Was it like you get to kind of a level of expertise in something when you have about 10,000 hours in it? And I think I've got about 25,000 hours in this thing now. And so it's almost like the matrix has fallen for me. You know, when I see the dots, I feel like I can read them pretty clearly.
So Mark, I think I know the answer to this question, but you mentioned earlier about somebody being wired for the role. Let's just say like a maintenance salesperson, a hunter, right? So there's certain skill sets and survey assessments you look for. If they're not a perfect match, doesn't mean they can't be successful in that role, right? So can you explain what that looks like as an employer, as somebody doing the hiring, what they should be looking for specifically?
Yeah, so Jim, that's a great question because people oftentimes they're a little bit fearful up front, right? Because they're thinking, hey, that it's already hard getting enough candidates, right? And then when we get them in, if there's only one kind of profile that we're going to be willing to take on for this position, now we're looking for a needle in a haystack. And my response to that is twofold. Number one is we can help you get more candidates in the pipeline. But number two is it doesn't have to be just one particular profile. So you mentioned hunters, right? Well, there are 4 or 5 different types of hunters that we would look at and go, hey, any one of these could work well in a hunting role. You're going to need to lead them a little bit differently, but there's not. By the way, we have 19 typified patterns. We don't have just one that's a hunter. We'd say, for instance, with Culture Index, if we're looking for a role like that, there are 3 or 4 that we say, hey, we have very high success with these patterns. And so no longer are we looking for a needle in the haystack, but we are narrowing it down to a group of patterns that you're going to have a much higher success rate for that particular type of role.
Thank you.
So we know what Jim's profile looks like, and I think probably everyone in Synergy could nail Jim's profile pretty well. I'm curious, Mark, what's your profile look like?
Oh, I'm a less charming version of Jim. Equally bad at details, but less charming. It's really not a good combination.
I'm calling BS on that one. Well, Mark, talking about the profiles, a couple two-pronged questions. So you talked about a refresher for clients that are aligned with you. And then also, we've been talking a lot about recruiting and bringing people on, which is huge. But how is the tool used internally with your existing team, maybe to identify future leaders, things of that nature?
Yeah.
And is that part of the refresher?
Yeah, it is part of the refresher, but it's really part of the program right from the beginning, in that, we want to survey everybody inside of the company. And I'm an old enough guy to know that, unless you're a sole proprietor, you've got some people on the wrong seat on the bus, right? And because nobody, I've yet to look at the company that has more than 15 or 20 employees and they go, wow, this is amazing. You put absolutely everybody in the right seat on the bus, right? Everybody's got some pain points and some places where they know, boy, we might not have put that person in the right spot. So that's the first thing we want to identify is, hey, who's in the wrong seat on the bus? And it doesn't mean that hey, fire them right away. They might be very well aligned for a different seat on the bus in your company, right? They may be installing, but they'd be better as a maintenance tech, or they may be in CSR, but they'd be better as a dispatch, or there are different places where they might fit just stronger inside of your company. And every once in a while, right, we do come across where, hey, this person is not only a wrong fit for that position, but could be a wrong fit for your company.
And do you find sometimes too, when you're trying to identify future leaders out of a team, that there's a way you can utilize it as well?
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the biggest uses of our product is, we all started somewhere, right? So Julie, what was your first job you ever had?
Very first, even as
Very
like
first job where they gave you a paycheck.
Yes, I worked in a grocery store in the deli.
Yes.
Yes.
Jim, what was yours?
I was a gas station attendant, filling gas and checking oil levels, and then also counting the cigarettes when we had to do the inventory at the end of the day.
Yep, I scooped ice cream at Friendly's ice cream parlor, right? My guess is the managers of those places, right, of the deli or the grocery store or certainly the Friendly's ice cream parlor, was not thinking back then, boy, we have a real future leader on our hands, right? They were just trying to get you to show up, right? They didn't care about any of us. But it's the same thing inside of our organizations, right? We tend to put people into positions that are entry-level positions. And then we if we want a real leader, we tend to think, oh, we have to go outside the company for that. I think it was Mark Twain that said, right, the leader is just the smartest person is always just some guy from out of town, right? Like we always think that somebody from outside the company is gonna fix things. Oftentimes those people are inside your company. And if you could identify some of those people that you say, hey, these people have the profile that we're looking for, actually for 2 or 3 levels up from where they're currently at, and start mentoring and coaching them there, that's actually a much healthier process than having to go outside the company every time you need a leader.
So I know you've covered a lot of it, but if there's one thing that you would like to see every organization incorporate into their recruiting strategies, is there one thing that just jumps out that you say, we just do this for the remainder of 2022, we're going to set ourselves up for success?
Yeah, so I think it is different for every company based on what they're currently doing and what industry they're in. But I think a real 30,000-foot broad stroke to that, Jim, would be this. We've got to move from a reactive strategy in recruiting to a proactive strategy. And I know that sounds really broad, but let me kind of dial down a little bit. Reactive is, hey, we've got some ads out there and we're waiting for people to respond to them. That used to be able to work, but if you do that now, you're really just living off the leftovers, right? It's the people that aren't getting recruited. What we have to do is we have to do that, right? We have to do good messaging. We have to get them on job posting boards. We have to get the page. We have to do all that. But in addition to that, we need to move to a proactive strategy where we are actively hunting for talent, right? And different industries do it different way. Like if you're looking for a licensed plumber, right? Well, in most states, those licensed plumbers, there's actually a list of them that you can get, and you start a drip campaign where you are personally recruiting those people. Every month they're hearing from you, right? And one of those times that you reach out to them, you're going to hit them on a day that they hate their boss, and that's when you're going to get them, right? Your internal referral program, if 20% of the people that you bring on, your people that you hire, are not coming through your internal referral program, you're not aggressively hunting enough with the people that are already inside of your company. They're the ones that know the people that you're trying to reach. And there are lots of other ways for us to get proactive, and using social media to get proactive, and creating a sense of messaging that attracts a younger population through your social media, so people want to be part of what you're doing. But generally speaking, the umbrella I would put that under is we have to make sure that we're not still doing a reactive strategy and waiting and then saying, the job market's tight. Well, it is, and that's why that strategy won't work anymore.
Mark, you just mentioned the internal referral process, which we talk a lot about at Synergy meetings and with our members. Is there any tip or anything specific that you tell your clients how they can build up their referral program?
Yeah, so Julia, I start by asking them, do you have an internal referral program? And the answer is almost always a pause, and then there's, yeah, I think we do. I think we do have one of those, right? Which means nobody in the company knows about it, right? So the first thing is, it's got to become something that is part of the DNA of the company. So every time you have a weekly meeting, right, with your team, that it's part of that meeting, right? You have to create a culture that it's an expectation and a celebration that this is just part of what we do. We hire people that we know, that we are connected with. And rather than, and listen, I think there's a case to be made for outside recruiting agencies. I'm not trying to disparage them, but if we could give that money to our existing employees to have them do that work, and by the way, it costs a lot less to do that, then the company saves money and you reward the people inside of your company. But you have to make it something that you celebrate every week and remind people every week. Because what I found with internal referral programs is, number one, they're overly complicated, meaning if somebody stays for a year, you get paid. Well, people don't think 12 months down the road typically. Number two is they're under communicated, meaning they're just not communicated much. And if you communicate your internal referral program, 7 days later, everybody's forgotten about it. Like, you've got to keep it in front of people. And number three, it's got to be enough that makes people go, oh, a lot of money. And if it makes, oh, that's my money, and keep it freshly communicated on a regular basis and don't overcomplicate it, you should have a large percentage of your candidates coming through that program. It's just that very few companies actually do those three things.
So I want to pose a different question, and that is, you've been a great partner with Synergy and our members. When you think of Synergy and our members, what words come to mind to you? What jumps out at you when you think of our group?
Professionalism, right? This is a group of people. The reason why they're in Synergy is because they're always wanting to get better, right? And so they're not companies that are just kind of resting on their past and becoming a lifestyle business. They've chosen to be part of Synergy because they want to be in a peer group where they're getting sharpened. And I see that in the companies that I work with Synergy, is that they're always thinking about, hey, how do we get better? How do we push the envelope further? And so that's the first thing that jumps to mind. I think the other thing is a commitment to excellence. You know, when I think about companies, and I don't mean to isolate any, but, you know, and I think about, the first one that pops in my mind is Cox Engineering, right? Because they've been clients probably the longest of any Synergy company that I work with. And they just have this commitment to excellence in everything that they do. I see it in how they apply Culture Index, but then as I'm in there, I can see how they apply it to every facet of their business.
Those are some very kind words, and cheers to Allison, who really leads our recruiting for the team Synergy, and also to our members, because we grow organically from members who speak to the things you just mentioned, the ability to really stand out in the organization. And we wouldn't be where we were today without partners like yourself that really helped us. So thank you so much for what you've done for our members and Team Synergy.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. And by the way, I promised that I would. Lucky Goat is sponsoring my coffee that's in my cup. It's Lucky Goat. So.
Thanks again, Mark.
Cheers,
All right, everybody.
Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
All right, have a great one.
Come on, drink storm with me. Come on, drink storm with me. Synergy. Come on.